she goes, I've got too many knees. I don't think I'm a human. I think I'm an alien. And there's a small number of them who complain to the ETs saying, you can't do this to me. You've got no right. And the ETs say, but you agreed to this before you were born. And this boy has birthmarks in exactly the same places as the bullet wounds, a small one on the back and a large one on the front. I feel like I've done enough research to have an informed opinion on this. And it just seems you get to a point where it's undeniable.
With me today is Simon Bown. Thanks for being here, Simon. It's good to have you on the show.
Yeah, it's great to talk to you around the other side of the world.
Well, I appreciate you getting up so early too, because I know it's, what would you say, it was 6:30 a.m. in the morning over there?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's London time. Well, I've had to occasionally get up early, but I'm glad that it's 5:30 p.m. for me, but I really appreciate you being on the show. So I wanted to start off with, I don't often talk to guests about UFOs. So I know that you do a lot of things. You've got a podcast that deals with a lot of different esoteric topics, but you did say, if I'm not mistaken here, that you've had your own UFO sightings. So what's the most interesting one of those that you've had? Let's start there.
Yeah, okay. I've been playing bass guitar for so many years, and I was playing a gig with a band in the early 90s, and it was in a town just west of London called Beaconsfield. And we finished at like midnight, and it was a Sunday night blues gig. So it got to 1 a.m. and I finally loaded the car and I was on my way home. And there's a motorway called the M40 heading back into London. And I knew that stretch of the motorway really well because it used to be a commute. And as I'm driving along, I noticed there's no other cars behind me, in front of me, on the other side of the motorway. But up ahead of me on the left is a really bright light in a field. And I thought, I know that field. That's an empty field. Maybe this is emergency works, like they're fixing a gas main or electricity stuff. And I slowed down and I got down to maybe 5 miles an hour. And I was just crawling along and I looked up and there was this craft. And it's not like I'm going to say it was definitely aliens, but it was shaped like a rugby ball. It was about 25 feet off the ground, 200 feet from me. It's the size of a large house. It was completely silent. It didn't move an inch the whole time. Across one half of the bottom, there was all these red pin spot lights. And coming out of the other end of the craft was this really bright beam of light pointed at the ground. And I was just crawling along and, I'm holding the steering wheel and I'm slowly moving forward and looking up as I go past. And I got a good look at it for about, say, 30 seconds. And then I increased my speed and went home. So that was the sighting. So it's not a bad one, I suppose. It's not just a light in the sky. I saw this stationary craft just off the ground. And, there's that kind of thing in social media where people get abducted and you see the beam of light coming out the craft and somebody's slowly moving up inside. And I saw that really powerful beam coming off the craft. And years later, you start, was that an abduction? Were they actually lifting somebody up with that beam at that time? But anyway, yeah, I got home and checked the clock and the clock was right because there's a thing called missing time within the UFO alien abduction thing. So the clock was okay. There's all sorts of stories of people driving and seeing UFOs, and then they get home 2 hours later than they should have, and they just can't explain this loss of 2 hours. That I knew to check the clock, I was fine.
So how far away did you think the craft was from you? Did you say 200 feet?
Yeah, about 200 feet.
Wow, that's
So it's really
close.
quite close. Yeah.
So I think was one of the famous cases, the early ones. Was it Benny and someone, that early case where they were in their car traveling back in the 60s? And you
Betty
would
and
know that
Barney
one.
Hill.
That's it, Benny and Barney Hill. Yeah, that's probably the most famous one that I could think of. Where they lost time, didn't they? They had some hours that they couldn't account for.
Yeah. And I've interviewed Betty's niece 2 or 3 times on my podcast.
Okay.
Because become quite the investigator when it comes to UFOs. So she knows a lot about it, and she's published books on it and all sorts of things. So it was good to talk to her rather than just a researcher, because she remembers the phone ringing in the middle of the night, and it was her aunt Betty Hill calling her mum to say that this really weird thing happened on the road. So she was almost a first-hand witness, and
Yeah.
they did get a whole load of memories of what happened through hypnosis, which can be a controversial thing for recovering memories, hypnosis. But if you really know what you're doing, it can be quite effective.
Hmm. So was this encounter before you had an interest in that topic? I guess I'm interested in sort of the timeline of when that occurred versus, your interest in other esoteric topics as well as UFOs.
Well, it's always been there. I remember 10 years old going to the local public library, getting any books I could. They didn't have many, but there may be UFOs and Bigfoot and ghosts and that
Hmm.
kind of thing. So I'd read all those books. And over the years, I just got more and more books because, let's see, that would have been 1975 when I was 10 years old. So there's no internet around, no YouTube. You had other ways of researching it. And eventually I went to the College of Psychic Studies in London in the 80s. And I wasn't a student there, but the people could go there to learn mediumship and psychic stuff and past life regression and trance mediumship and things. So you could go and pay a little bit of money and the students could practice on you. So I would go every couple of weeks and see this student and that student and have all these different sort of experiences. And it's like 1987 was the first time I was taken through a past life regression. So I suppose in a way, I've been fascinated by it and reading these books for such a long time and then having my own experiences. And it really starts to build up some knowledge on it. It's like an education.
Hmm. Yeah, I was the same. I can't remember a time of not being interested in it. There was a book that was called Explaining the Unexplained. It was this really thick blue book. I can remember reading that when I was 8. So I was born a few years after you, but that would have been, 78, 79, when there was just got the color TV. And I wrote a letter to Whitley Strieber. So after I read Communion, when that first, oh, actually, I think it was Communion. I wrote a letter to him and I said how much I enjoyed his book. And he actually, back then, he would then send like a standard letter back to anyone who wrote to him. And I don't think I kept it. I went rummaging around my parents' house not so long ago trying to find this letter. And it was like, thank you for your letter. I get literally thousands of them every week and I can't reply to them all, but I do read them all. And it came back from Whitley, in the States. And I was so
Yeah.
excited when it arrived.
Yeah, there's a
Uh,
thing with that. I don't know if you want more information on UFO stuff, but what's interesting is after that book came out, he got thousands of letters from people saying they're having the same sort of experiences as him.
mm,
And he said his wife read every letter. And she said, one of the things she said is, this has got something to do with death. This has got something to do with the afterlife. And that was her making a really good connection decades ago. And now we're seeing it a lot more today in all this research we're doing.
yeah. Yeah. Well, we can dive into that. So what if I know, because you've mentioned past life regression. I know that's something that you've studied as well. So tell us about the connections that you've seen between ETs and those encounters and death.
Well, I've had people, as I take people through past life regression, I'm a clinical hypnotherapist. I've had a small number of people who've gone to past lives on other planets. That's an interesting connection. You can't verify any of it, obviously, but it's interesting when it shows up. Then I've talked to people on my UFO podcast who have been having these abduction experiences. And there's a small number of them who complain to the ETs saying, you can't do this to me. You've got no right. And the ETs say, but you agreed to this before you were born. So it's like the ET saying that you had this contract, before you incarnated. So the ETs are aware of the afterlife and reincarnation. So those the little things that show up now and then that make it more and more interesting.
Yeah, that very. What can you say to that? You say, "Well, I actually don't remember that happening," but I suppose if, if you say it's true, then I guess it must be true. Do you ever have
Yeah.
people that have had that kind of encounter and you've taken through a past life regression and then they've been able to recall what occurred?
Yeah, I've done that a little bit. And I think if I didn't know so much about that phenomenon, I'd refuse to do it. But I know how to take somebody through a regression, and that you have to use really basic non-leading questions. You can't suggest anything. So it's a question of when we go through it, you just say to, okay, what happened next? What happened next? That's what you're doing. But yeah, I had a guy who went back, and he was right there when he was a little kid, and he had his bedroom on the ground floor, and he could see through the door into this living room and his dad's big chair that his dad used to sit in. And he was looking, thinking, that's funny. There's a blanket on the back of that chair. He goes, no, it's moving. He goes, it looks like a little monkey. No, it's coming into my bedroom. And he was talking like that. And then he said, oh, I'm in the kitchen. And it's 3 o'clock in the morning. There's a powerful white light coming through the window. And there's this 6 foot tall grey alien standing in front of me. So these were all new memories for him. He just had these little hints that he thinks something might have happened. But, and I had another guy, he was really emotional. And I remember him on Zoom, he was sitting in this chair like this, just his head down, crying his eyes out. And I was saying to him, look, we can move away from this. And he goes, no, I want to know what happened. So we stuck with it. And he talked about all sorts of things.
Oh, that's incredible. So how did you become, we're going to jump around a little bit here because it's a very interesting topic for me, but how did you become interested in the past life regressions? And I know Barbara Lamb was kind of like one of the pioneers in that area, but whose work did you become interested in? What made you want to go down that path?
Well, it's just the thing of being so fascinated by it. And in 1987, I was at the College of Psychic Studies, and there's a list on the wall of who you can book time with. And I saw somebody doing past life regression, and I thought, oh, I'll give that a try. It's just, just another thing. And it actually turned out to be really powerful. And I saw this past life, and years later, I had another regression, and I returned to that past life. And there was some really insightful things there. And also, it started out, I was in this park. I was a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old. It was 1895. And my mum and dad were there with the pram, and there was a baby and a dog. And I knew all this, just had this knowledge about who everybody was and where I was. And I knew that the father in that life is my best friend in this life. Like, we've reincarnated together. And I don't know why, you just know this stuff. And the park was a bit weird because it was on such a steep slope. And you'd think a town planner would never look at that slope and think, oh, that's a good place to put a park. But a couple of years later, I was driving through North London, a place I'd never been to before. And there was that park exactly as I'd seen it in the past life regression. And the houses in the area were just the same as the ones I'd seen in this regression. But then I saw myself older, where I was a nurse in the First World War in France, and I was a few miles back from the front line. And so there was these huge canvas tents with all these like hospital beds and all these men coming in with these terrible injuries. And I had memories of that and seeing that. And later I Googled the uniforms for those nurses, and they're exactly what I saw in the regression. And there's this weird feeling that, you would never encounter this being a bloke, but the nurse's uniform had these long skirts right to the ground. And in that life, I was rushing backwards and forwards between these beds and turning corners and things, and my skirts were getting caught on things. And it was quite annoying. And it was a feeling that this was a long-term annoyance. For me, it was the first time, but for that person in that life, it seems like it's been years of getting really annoyed that you have to wear these long clothes. So that was quite insightful, and something cropping up you'd never think of, or it would come to you. And when I went to that past life again years later, I found myself on a street and there was a car there. I think this was the 1930s. And I was with this man who I just knew was my husband. And we were having this argument, and I was saying something like, oh, I can do this, I can sort it out. But he had this attitude of, oh, don't be silly, you're just a woman. And I felt really annoyed. And I felt like, you don't know what I'm capable of. You don't know what I did in the war and what I had to deal with. And so there was that insight of feeling like a woman and of being talked down to by a man, which is a perspective I would never have got in this life. So it's interesting how these things show up in past life regressions. And I got those little confirmations of the place and the clothes, and there was all those emotions. And so when I take people through past life regression, all this stuff can show up for you because you get this visualizations and emotions and knowledge. And it's, if you go and see a medium, they do a reading for you, you don't experience anything. But with past life regression, you're the person that experiences everything. So that's why it can be such an impact.
Yeah. Can you explain how the regression process actually works? I understand it's a kind of hypnosis, and I think I've been hypnotized once, but I've never actually had a past life regression, although I'd be fascinated to have one. But how does it work for someone who doesn't know about it?
Well, the way that I do it, there's the hypnotic induction, which is just leading you through relaxation and visualization. And there's a point in the hypnotic induction you wouldn't do in other hypnosis. And that's where we invite your spirit guides to be with us. And we ask them to show you the past life. And it may be, if somebody's looking for something therapeutic, we say to them, can you show us the past life that is the origin point of this current life issue? But sometimes people, they just want to explore. And I'll say, can you show us the past life that would be most beneficial to see today? And part of the way to enter into a past life is I might describe this really nice garden. And this is all coming up in your imagination because you're picturing it. And I say, there's this big wall at the bottom of the garden. There's a gate in the middle of the wall. And on the other side of this gate is one of your past lives. So I say to the person, go to the gate, now open it and step through into that past life. And I've described everything for them up to that point. But after that, I don't describe anything. That's when we start doing basic questions to find out who they are, where they are. And then we'll start moving it forwards. And I'll be saying, okay, what's happening here? Who are you with? What are your emotions? And again, keeping it very basic questions, open questions, not suggesting anything. I don't know what past life they'll go to. They might go to the medieval times. They might go to Victorian times, could be anywhere in the world. People have gone back so far, they're, like cavemen just wearing fur. Or they've gone back to places like Rome and Greece and Egypt. So then we work through it. And I've got all these techniques to use for moving through past lives and looking for things if we need to. So if it's about some physical problem or some phobia or something, and we're in the past life, I might say, I'll count you down from 5 to 0. When we get to 0, we'll move to a significant event in that life, an event that's the cause of your current life's issues. And then when we find them, we can release negative energy. I've got different techniques for doing that, or break the bond with the past life. And then towards the end of the regression, we move into the afterlife, or what they call the life between lives. And I describe it as a spiritual space of light. And I'll say to the person, you move in there and you feel this incredible love, and there'll be someone here to greet you. And that's where we would hope to encounter their spirit guides. And the spirit guides don't always show up. Sometimes people see a deceased loved one. Sometimes it's an animal. Sometimes nobody shows up. I did have a session where a spirit guide showed up and just said, I'm not going to talk to you. You're here to work on this lesson and I can't help you with it. That wouldn't be good. And then they just disappeared. So maybe that's why they don't show up all the time. But if they do, we can ask them all sorts of questions about this person's past life and their current life, and but why are they in this situation, and what is their purpose in this life? Are they on the right path? What did they agree to before they were born? And might ask, why did you show us this past life today, and what can we learn from it? And is there anything negative we need to release? We can ask the spirit guides for healing. Sometimes they almost hijack the session and take the person on somewhere else in the afterlife, because there's these different spaces that seem to be there. And this is something Michael Newton discovered years ago with his Life Between Lives sessions that he did with people. He's over 7,000 of them. And they were so consistent with everybody describing the same places. So it's like I said, I never know what's going to show up, but I know how to guide people through it. So that's basically how I would do a session.
And have you got, is there been a particular regression that you've done that you can talk about, which has really stuck with you as being incredible or particularly moving or informative?
Yeah, there's different things that have shown up. Where to start? Because there's one that wasn't very nice, and we didn't stay there very long. And it was a woman, and it was immediately as we entered a past life, right at the beginning, she said, "I'm watching the naked women and children go in the gas chamber." I said, "Well, look, what are you wearing?" And she said, "I'm a man and I'm in a German uniform." And she was just looking for an exploration session. There's no therapy needed. So I just, okay, we're going to leave that. We're going to leave that past life. So that stood out. There was another one, a woman, she went into the past life and she said, it's just a desert. It's a rocky desert. There's no buildings around. I said, well, can you look down, see what you're wearing? And she was just silent. And I said, what do you see? And she goes, I've got too many knees. I don't think I'm a human. I think I'm an alien. And we tried to get into that, but she didn't really connect with it anymore. And we went into a human past life after that. And there's another one, a woman wanted to find out about a phobia. And we went to a past life where she found herself as a hunter in a forest. And she was walking through the forest and she stepped into this bear trap, and these big metal claws came up and grabbed her leg. And what she hadn't told me is that she has eczema on her leg, and she was in her 50s. So that's in this life. And she tried everything to get rid of it. And she emailed me later, weeks later, and said the eczema's completely gone. And where the bear trap grabbed her leg was exactly where the eczema was in this life. So it seemed like there was some connection there, and we released something. It's amazing how this shows up, because I used to take people through stop smoking hypnosis, and it can be really effective. It doesn't work for absolutely everybody, but I did get emails from people saying, I haven't had one cigarette since the session. They say, I don't even think about it. There's no craving at all. It just doesn't come up. And the thing is, I'd be in the room with them. We'd do the session and they get up to leave. They didn't feel any different. But it was the days afterwards that then they noticed. And it was like there was a change on the subconscious level. Nothing they noticed consciously. It was only when they thought, hang on, I haven't had a cigarette since yesterday, or something like that. And there's one guy said he's been driving around in the car for weeks with a new packet of 20 cigarettes in the glove box, and he hasn't touched it, hasn't even thought of picking it up. So it's just weird how it works. I don't know if anybody really knows how it works, but the techniques do work with that.
Was there anyone in particular who you've, I mean, you mentioned the book there, I forget his name now. I'm sure I've read that book, the Life Between Lives one. Is there anyone in particular who stands out as a teacher of past life regression techniques, or a school? Because I'm sure there'll be people that'll be watching, they'll be going, that sounds really interesting. I think it's something I'd like to learn how to do.
Yeah, I was taught the Past Life Regression Institute online. And well, first of all, I went and I got a diploma in clinical hypnotherapy. That was a course that was 10 months long. And so there's 30 people in the class, and we learned so much, and we practice on each other all the time. So I can't tell you how many times I've been hypnotized, but I really like being hypnotized. It's just a really relaxed kind of condition to be in. And then after getting the diploma there, I went on and got the past life regression therapies certification. And there's all sorts of books out there that are really good to read for past life people who are doing past life regression. People you probably wouldn't have heard of. There's a woman called Lorraine Flaherty in London, and her book was really good. And I interviewed her. She was fascinating. Oh man, there's so many. I'd have to start looking through all sorts of stuff. I mean, if you're interested in reincarnation, it's good to read books by Jim Tucker and Ian Stevenson and Jim Matlock, Carol Bowman. They're all great researchers. And Jim Tucker was at the University of Virginia in America, where they studied children with past life memories. So it's this thing of over the years learning all these different things. And with past life regression, there's so many times people will confirm that past life was real. I've had a client send me an oil painting, a portrait of the person they were in the past life, because they tracked them down and this was their picture. And then I interviewed a guy who was a homicide detective in America, and he had his past life regression in the early 90s. And he didn't want to do it. He was kind of bullied into it by somebody that he worked with. There's this woman, and he was like, he's a tough guy, homicide cop. He's not going to do past life regression. And he said it got to this point. He was in the precinct, and he'd see her coming down the hallway, and he'd dive in an office to get out the way of her. And he just thought, this is stupid. I'm just going to do it, prove it's rubbish, and then we can get on with our lives. But in the end, he saw this past life, and he had what he called 28 proofs that he confirmed of stuff he saw in that past life was real. He tracked down that life, even found the guy's unpublished autobiography and was able to read that and confirm things that he saw. So, yeah, I'm probably going way off what your question was there.
No, that's fascinating. So when you say unpublished biography or autobiography, was it, how did he come across that? Did he get in contact with did he find the family of the person? And then how did that happen?
Well, he's a detective, so he knew how to investigate.
Yeah.
And he thought to him, because he saw this painting, he saw himself painting what he called this hunchback woman, and amongst all these other things he saw in this past life. And he thought, I must have seen that painting somewhere in a museum or in a book or something. And he started going to all these museums and getting all these books, trying to find this painting that might be by a famous artist. And then you can say, you see, that's where I saw it, not in the past life regression. Could not find that painting anywhere. And he went to New York, and he went to the Museum of Art and started getting all these books out and searching. And in the end, he kind of gave up. He said it was 2 years he was doing this. And he went on holiday with his wife to New Orleans. And there was this road with all these little galleries, and they went into one. And his wife was looking around downstairs, and he went upstairs to where you might say the crap paintings are. And there was that painting right in front of him, exactly as he'd seen it in the past life regression. So then he was able to talk to the people in the gallery, and they could tell him the artist's name, and they gave him a little pamphlet. So then he right, I've got a name now, I can do this research. And so he was able to go back to these art museums, and this guy was like a jobbing artist. He wasn't brilliant, but he wasn't bad. And it was the 1870s, 1890s. People were paying $200 or $300 to paint their portrait. It's like the top guys could charge thousands. So he did track him down and find out all these things, that he saw in the past life regression were true. And it was in the museum that he really tracked him down, found his unpublished biography, and found a lot more of his pictures of his paintings, and found out about his life, about how he was in Paris and studying there, because he said he had this past life image in his mind of being in one of those kind of artist studios where the whole roof is windows and all this light's coming in, and that was true. And yeah, so it's the book called, I think, Portrait of a Past Life. And it's a guy called John. I was going to say Jon Snow, but that's a character in a TV show, isn't it? Anyway, yeah,
Oh, so
that was a really good
he
interview.
actually wrote a book about his past life. Did he? Yeah. Okay.
And he was a guest on the podcast.
I'll look that one up. I'm always looking for new reading material. Fascinating. So tell us about, we haven't talked about near-death experiences yet. So that's one of my favorite topics. And how did you, I know you, obviously you're interested in that since an early time, but how did you get to be interviewing people about that and then out writing a book?
Yeah, it was back in the 80s. I first got Raymond Moody's book, Life After Life, which was the first real book about near-death experiences. And that introduced me to it. And so I started looking for more books, but they weren't so many around in the 80s. It was only in the 90s they started becoming more and more. So I was reading those books. And then podcasts became a thing. And I had a commute in the morning that was an hour and 15 minutes to get there, hour and 15 back. That's 2.5 hours. So every day I was doing 2.5 hours of podcasts, listening to stuff about near-death experiences and, well, UFOs as well. And after a while, I thought, I'm a creative kind of guy. I could probably do a podcast. So that's what I started doing. And being a bass player, I'd been using home recording software. So I knew how to record a voice. That's a piece of cake. And I was lucky. I just started emailing people and saying, would you be a guest on my podcast? And they said, yes. And it's amazing. I was a nobody with 0 downloads and people are saying yes.
Yeah.
But that was maybe 2019. And now I've done 900 episodes and this is what I do for a living, along with the hypnotherapy. And so all this stuff started coming up in near-death experiences where there were confirmations and all this spiritual stuff. And I really got so into it. I've interviewed so many people, but for my book, I picked out people who had this thing where they had their out of body experience. They saw something. And then after they were revived, they said what they saw, and people could say, but you were dead when that happened. There's no way you could have seen that. And that goes right from people who were in the operating theatre looking down on their body to people who were miles away from where their body is. Because there's a criticism that if it's in the operating theatre and they're watching what's happening, maybe they had some form of consciousness, maybe they hallucinated, they had sounds, they put it all together, and that's how they knew what happened. But these people are hooked up to like heart monitors and brain monitors. They know the heart stopped, they know the brain's flatlined. I talked to Dr. Eben Alexander on my podcast. And he was professor of neurosurgery at Harvard Medical School. So he knows about the brain. And he said, when your heart stops, brain will flatline in around 20 seconds. And when it's in that state, it's impossible to make and retain complex memories. But that's exactly what's happening with these people that have these verifications. And so that's what I started to become really interested in, because my podcast is looking for evidence of an afterlife. And I'm not religious. I never have been. So it's all about that sort of thing. Is there verifications that we can find that can show that person really was out of their body? But also in the podcast, I talk to mediums and children with past life memories and all sorts of researchers. So it's been quite an education for me doing that as well. And I got to a point where there's been only one other book that has that focus on verified near-death experiences. They call them veridical. And veridical comes from a Latin word, veridicus, which means the truth. So these veridical near-death experiences, I've got it here on my bookshelf. That was 2007. There hasn't been another one since then. So I thought, that's what I'll do. I'll write this verified book and nothing but these verification accounts. So that's what my book is. There's 30 accounts in there, all with these verifications.
I think it was Dr. Eben Alexander. I think he was on the podcast about 18 months ago. He was one of those people that said yes, but had a very, very, very small channel. So it was great. But I think after I read his book, it was really, I think if anyone of sound mind reads that book, it's hard to say, well, that it's rubbish, or it's fiction, or it's people imagining what they're imagining, because he really was like, his brain was completely toast. It was eaten by bacteria, and he had nothing, and yet he brought back these incredible memories of things. And I think it's also his position as a neuro specialist that kind of brings a lot of credibility to the idea that there's something more going on once the brain stops.
Yeah, because he can read all his own medical records and understand everything. And
Mm.
he also knows what that meningitis that you had on the brain does to the brain. And I think the doctors told his family he's probably not going to survive, but if he does, he won't be able to talk, he won't be able to walk. And now he's back to normal, like nothing happened.
Mm. Yep, large as life. And he's pretty old too now. He's got so much energy. So uh, uh, tell us, let me see. So you've got a couple of podcasts as well. It's interesting to talk to a fellow content creator. Actually, I don't often get an opportunity to do that. So you've got the Alien UFO podcast and Our Paranormal Afterlife. So when did you start doing those? Which one was it? One of those? Well, I guess it's, which one did you do the NDE interviews with?
That's our paranormal afterlife.
Mm-hmm. So
I
that's where
did
you
that, started
started.
that in 2019. And so it was a thing of just all these different things that I'd read about. And all of my episodes are an hour-long interview, and I always try and read the book of the guest, because just about all of my guests have had a book out, and that's how I get my
Mm.
questions together. It's a thing of worry. It's like, man, I'm worried I won't have enough to say. What am I going to ask them? So I get their book and I go through it and I find all these details. And over time, I found that maybe compared to some content creators, my interviews are more in depth and more detailed because I've read the book and I know these little things to ask them that nobody else is asking them. And I've had people, after we finished the interview, saying, "You're the first podcaster who's actually read the book." So I think I might be doing something right. I mean, I've had over 7 million downloads now over time. But it was a thing of looking for researchers and experiences and all these different things to bring together this information. So it is a thing where it's not religious at all. I don't go looking for that. I had an email once from somebody who said, it's not a real near-death experience unless they see Jesus. And, so many people have these experiences. They don't see Jesus, and they're genuine near-death experiences. And also there's the experiences that are distressing or kind of neutral. They're not all love and being in the light. So also I do other episodes now where, because I've read their book, I get permission from the author to do a read from the book. So I put the interview out Monday, then on the Tuesday, there's an episode, just me reading an extract from their book. And they can be really good episodes as well. I think I've done hundreds of those now. And it's good because then you can really get the detail out of the book of something that happened to that person. That's fascinating. And
Yeah,
I
that's
get
a great idea.
emails, somebody emailed me and said, I love these episodes. This is what I listen to when I'm falling asleep. You think, so I put you to sleep then, do I?
Well, I was going to say before, you do have a kind of let's say hypnotic voice, and I guess that comes with being a therapist. But there is something about the way that you speak which is very kind of soothing and calming. So I get what they're saying. Speaking of questions, I do have quite a few more. So, what do you think? You've After interviewing all these people, especially the 900 odd so with NDEs, what do you think consciousness is now? And has that changed over time?
Yeah, it has changed over time. It's because it's been an education, and you hear things like soul and spirit and consciousness, and you start to think, well, these are all the same thing. But the word soul has perhaps got too much baggage with it, too much religious baggage, and spirit as well. That's, maybe you start thinking of hauntings or something when you hear the word spirit. but it seems that we are a part of our soul. It's not when you incarnate, it's 100% of your soul is in your body. It's like you just have a spark of your soul. And the way of looking at it, the way I look at it is you might see, imagine a tree with all these leaves, and the tree is your soul, and all these leaves are these different lives. And just as the tree is experiencing all the leaves in the same moment, your soul's experiencing all the lives in the same moment. Because in the afterlife, there is no time, it's an eternal now. So there aren't really past lives or future lives. Your soul's there in all of them. And I wonder if past life regression isn't past regression, it's just sideways regression. And then you start hearing about other things where other universes, multiverses, and there may be other people like Rod, maybe in all these different universes having all these different lives. And there's evidence for that, only a little bit, but I love it how that stuff shows up. So, yeah, I think I've forgotten what the question was.
Oh, is what you think consciousness is, and you're going that direction pretty much, just describing what you feel it is now.
Yeah, so I feel it's an energetic being that is almost something that we can't comprehend, that is just, I want to say powerful. Powerful's the wrong word, because powerful you might link to aggression or violence or something. It's an incredible being that we're just one small part of, and that we don't incarnate one after the other. And I kind of feel that once we die, when Simon dies, I go into the afterlife and stay there. And it's not that Simon reincarnates into another body, it's because I'm just a spark of that soul, and it's another spark of that soul. And then you go back and you join back into it, and the soul will integrate all of your experiences into itself, because that's why it's incarnating, is to have experiences and learn everything there is to learn about being human. So that's why you have so many lives. And then you have lives on other planets. And there's this 3D environment that we exist in. I was going to say survive in then. And that this is just one small part of the soul's journey. And once it's had enough lives in this 3D, it moves on to the next thing where it's learning stuff. It's not that you just have all these lives on Earth and then that's the end of it. And the soul is then back with whatever you think God is. You know, some people call it source, and some people call it everything that's around us, and we're all part of God anyway. But yeah, that's kind of what I see our consciousness is a spark of the soul that continues, but then there's no time in the afterlife. So it's not like time passes and eventually something happens to you. Everything's the eternal now. And that's why it goes on forever, because time doesn't exist.
Hmm. That's a really tricky one to wrap your head around, isn't it? Because we live in time as part of our existence. There is no frame of reference to describe an existence without it. So it's a
Yeah,
hard one to
because I've had
to
near-death
grapple with.
experiences. Near-death experiences have said to me things like, I can tell you what happened in the experience, and I can say this happened, then that happened, then that happened. But actually, all these things happened at the same moment. It wasn't a linear progression through the story when they were in that afterlife space. So they experienced that thing of it all being in the now.
Hmm. Yes, we have to. Those people take an experience that's occurred in that realm, if you like, and then they've got to translate that into something that makes sense in this realm. So I guess that's the best we can do.
Yeah.
So have you had any other UFO type experiences? I can tell you, I would be super excited if I even saw a UFO from a distance. I don't think I ever have. I've had some pretty out there, very lucid dreams, but not an actual encounter. Has there only been one for you?
Well, there was one. It's gigging. I was driving. Moved to the south coast, and I was driving up to this town called Reading to do a gig, and we go across this part of called the New Forest, which is a national forest. So it's really protected. You can't do anything there. It's all about nature. You can drive through it, but the road's just wide enough for one car. And you'll be going through all these trees, through this forest. You'll come around a corner and there'll be a whole bunch of horses just standing in the road, or maybe sheep or something. So I was heading north, and it's a dual carriageway. So it's 2 lanes that way, 2 lanes that way. It's all bushes on either side. There's no way you could stop. And I was driving, it's dark, and I looked to my right, and half a mile away is this ball of orange light. It's about the size of a car, and it's really, really bright, and it's just sitting there. It doesn't move at all, and it's so big and bright, and a ball of orange light is a common sighting. So I keep driving, and I'm looking for somewhere to stop, and I can't. There's so many cars there. And I keep looking over and then looking back at the road, and then looking over and looking back at the road, keep checking on it. And so that was an interesting sighting. But we hear of all sorts of weird synchronicities when it comes to people who have these experiences. Some people who have near-death experiences have the same after effects as people who have alien abduction. This weird change in giving you maybe psychic energy or poltergeist activity in the house. Can't wear watches because they just won't work, or electrical devices malfunction. But anyway, I was on my way back, and I was listening to a podcast. Now, this would have been 2 a.m. and I'm coming across the forest, and it was Mike Cleland interviewing somebody, Joe Montaldo, who's a researcher. And Mike Cleland's talking about how he woke up one night. He was in this house where he was living, and it was all open fields around the house. And he woke up, and there was this really bright light coming through the window. And he got up on his elbows and looked out, and there was this massive ball of light and these 5 grey aliens walking towards the house. And this voice in his head said, "Now is the time to lie down and go to sleep." And that's exactly what he did. And he said, if you think about it, you see these aliens walking to your house, you jump out of bed and you get a baseball bat and you'd be ready to fight them off. But anyway, when he said that to Joe Montaldo about the ball of light, Joe said to him, "And you know what that ball of light was now, don't you?" And the thing is, he said that exactly the moment I got to the point where I saw a ball of light. And it was such a coincidence, a synchronicity. It was almost like Joe Montaldo was saying to me, "You know what that ball of light was now, don't you?"
Wow. That's I think it was the book The UFO of God. Was it Chris Bledsoe? Do you know who I'm talking about?
Yeah, he's been a guest on the
Yeah.
podcast.
Is he? Yeah, he would be interesting. I feel like that was a pretty fascinating book, but a lot of that was the orbs and people come to their property and they'd see orbs there.
Yeah.
That'd
Yeah.
be something. Who's the fellow that's on there, the Skinwalker Ranch? Who bought the Skinwalker Ranch?
Oh, is it it's that billionaire, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And he's done a lot of stuff as well. He did this great competition. I don't know if you've seen that, for people who write essays on evidence of an afterlife, and the first prize was $500,000, and you had to be invited to take part. And I've interviewed people who were winners in that, came first and second and third. And they said they had so many great essays sent in that they had to extend how many winners there were. And so people were in a space where they get $20,000 because their essay was so good, or $100,000. But
Wow.
yeah, it's too early in the morning for me. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, no, I could look it up in another tab, but I won't do that. But yeah, Skinwalker Ranch, that sounds like that's it. Yeah, it sounds like a fascinating place, doesn't it? And when you see these big, military type tough guys talking about how they could see there was something there, like a craft or something, but they could also feel, they had these weird feelings that they would sort of have as well, that that really, disarmed them, turn them from tough guys into something that they were almost, it felt like a little bit afraid, or it was very alien to them. But it brings a lot of credibility to those really strange things that happen in that place. I think it's a fascinating topic, that one.
Yeah, I
Um,
talked to someone who went to Skinwalker Ranch while they were doing all the research, and he was there, and they said, "Well, we want to see if you'll have some sort of experience. If we just go out into these fields in the wilds, and what you do is you sit on a chair in the middle there, and we'll back off about half a mile, and you might have an experience." And so he said, "Okay," and then nothing happened, and he's sitting in this chair, and he's like, "Hang on, I'm bait." It's like they're trying to get a UFO to come down. They've just put some bait in the field for the UFO to come and pick up or something.
oh, that's pretty, especially if it's at night time. Like, it's out in the middle of nowhere. That place would be good view of the night sky. So what do you find is the most comforting thing that you've learned about talking to people about their NDE experiences and their past life experiences when it comes to the idea that your life is going to end at some time?
Yeah, you just get to a point where you realize, because there's so much verification with NDEs and past lives, and also through mediumship, and amazing things happen there, that you get to a point, for me, where you can't deny it. And I've been reading so many books over the decades. I've talked to so many people now. I feel like I've done enough research to have an informed opinion on this. And it just seems you get to a point where it's undeniable. But it's also a feeling of, I don't really know what will happen. Something will happen, but you get different reports from different places about what happens in the afterlife. And so I'm sure it's there, but it might be something that's so strange that you, like near-death experiences say, they can't really describe it. They do the best they can. So yeah, and it's not like I'm looking forward to it or anything, but I'm not afraid of it. And
Mm.
there's a joke. So I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to be there when it happens. But there's all sorts of stuff. I could show you a book I've got on the shelf here. It's
Yeah,
This is by Dr. Ian Stevenson. Have you seen this one?
I have not. I have not read that one.
And it's all about children who have um, like physical things that relate to a past life. So that there's a boy who remembered a past life as a teacher, and he was shot, and they worked out who the previous life was, and the boy went to the house, and he went in the house, and he goes, "Oh, this is my wife." And he's a little boy saying, "Oh, you've moved the room around. The furniture used to be like this, and the cupboard was over there." And he opened the cupboard and said, "Where's my weapons?" And the woman's like, this, how could this kid know this stuff? And over time, he knew so much stuff about this life. They couldn't deny there's some connection there. And the boy talks about it as uh, it's like his memories. It's not telling a story or something. And he did have weapons, this school teacher. In fact, he was a bit of a scoundrel and a womanizer, and he got involved with the wrong people. And one morning he was murdered on the way to school. And Dr. Ian Stevenson could look at the autopsy report and see where the bullet entered his head at the back and came out at the front. And this boy has birthmarks in exactly the same places as the bullet wounds, a small one on the back and a large one on the front. And so that's some really weird evidence and connection to that life. Like, how could it be so exact in the same places? And so over time in his research, he came across so many kids that have these sort of things. And there's all these pictures in the book. And can be a really weird confirmation of, I was looking for a particular, there's a picture there of this teacher. But there's this boy here, and he's standing next to Dr. Ian Stevenson's interpreter, and they're both from the same ethnic background. But he remembers a past life as an American bomber pilot in the Second World War who got shot down. And this is over Burma, which is Myanmar.
Mm.
And you can see how he looks like he's got white skin, he's got blue eyes, blonde hair, and he looks like an American. He remembers all the
Mm.
stuff about America. So there's 100 cases like that in this book of how birthmarks and birth deformities link up with the injuries of the past life. Well, that's an amazing piece of evidence. And there was even a girl that was born with these, she's still got these marks on her arms, these indentations. And she remembered being a Japanese soldier that was captured and killed, executed. And they were tied to a tree. And the marks on her arms looked like rope where the soldier would have been tied. And the mother said when she was really young, you could look at these grooves and you could see the rope strands in the skin, the marking of it.
Wow.
So, you hear stuff like that. And then there's famous cases of children with past life memories that, Dr. Jim Tucker has investigated with like James Lineker, the World War II pilot, who remembers so much stuff from that. And that's been confirmed. So it just becomes an overwhelming amount of information that shows that we survived death.
It does make me wonder, I think about life is like, if you can pose the question, which is, well, why don't we all remember what our previous lives are like? And I like to think of it as like, it would be like playing a game of poker with all the cards turned over, like how interesting is that going to ultimately be? And yet there are these instances of people who do have some pretty vivid memories of their past lives, and we've got the ability to access them as well. And I just find that fascinating that it's kind of like we purposely forget, what our previous lives were, and yet they're still there. And if we're interested enough, we can get at them as well if we really want to.
Yeah. There's a thing about how before you're born, you work out your life plan. So you know how your life is going to go, and you know which lesson you're going to learn. And you sit down with other members of your soul group and agree what role they're going to play in your life and what role you'll play in their life. And so, because we're here to learn lessons, because your soul wants these experiences, knowing about all your past lives would kind of make the current life, it would take away all the impact and the emotional side of it and the learning. You could almost sit back and think, oh, I think I've had enough of this life. I'm just going to move on to the next one, or it doesn't really teach you. So forgetting is an essential part of it. But it may be part of your life plan that you're supposed to remember something. There's a lady called Jenny Cockle who remembers past lives. She's remembered this stuff her whole life. She's not a child that remembered, because almost all the children that remember past lives will start forgetting everything when they get to be like 7, 8 years old. But she was a guest on my podcast. She remembered so much, and she's in her 50s and she can still talk about these past lives. And so it's like I had 3 past life regressions, and I saw these 3 lives, and they all seem to be focused on the lesson of rejection. And each life I was rejected in completely different ways and learning how that feels. So if there's 3 lives to learn about rejection, there may be more lives to learn about rejection. So that just shows you how many lives you might need to live to learn about all these different things. And I just imagine that you learn about rejection in one life, the next one you're going through that again, and you'll be like, oh yeah, I remember. I know what this is all about. And it would really decrease the lesson.
And that's just one aspect of life as well. There must be so many. All right. Well, let us know how people can get in touch with you if they want to, Simon, and whatever else you've got going on. I know you've got your book, and what else do you offer people?
Yeah, my website is pastliveshypnosis.co.uk. And my book is there, Verified Near-Death Experiences. So that's out on Amazon. You can get it on paperback, audiobook, or on Kindle. And that's one of my podcasts, Our Paranormal Afterlife. The other one is called the Alien UFO Podcast. And I find them, if I do say so myself, I find them to be really fascinating. And, it's like I talked to Kai Dickens recently, telepathy tapes. And
Right. Yeah. is
I
awesome.
talked to somebody recently who had these experiences of being abducted by aliens. So it's a real big, you know, load of stuff to look at. But I asked Kai Dickens, has any of these autistic people ever said anything about UFOs or aliens? And she said, yeah, they have talked about it. So it shows
Mm.
up in the telepathy tapes as well. And so, yes, if somebody wanted to do a past life regression with me, you can go on my site and book a call on Zoom that's free of charge. It's a 20-minute consultation. So we can talk about regression and what you might want to achieve with it. And yeah, I think that's me. I've got everything covered there.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll put links to in the show notes for all of that stuff. And I somehow have not managed to run across your podcast before, but I definitely will check that out. And it's been really interesting talking to you today, Simon. So we'll probably have you back again for a live stream if you want to do that.
Yeah, it'd be great.
And thanks for being a guest on my show today.
Yeah, it's been good. I really enjoyed it.